As we wrap up our final Next Normal Now convening for 2021, I'm pleased to sit down with David Bank, editor and CEO of Impact Alpha, to reflect on these important conversations. Before we begin, I'd like to take this moment just to personally thank David and Impact Alpha for being our media partner on the Next Normal Now series. We've known them since Impact Alpha was just getting off the ground, and they've been great partners to us throughout. But this was a special series for us, and it really means a lot to us to have you as our partner on the event.
Well, thank you, Amit, and thanks to the whole GIN community for inviting us to be the media partner. And we really appreciated the sessions, and we got 3 good stories out of it. So thanks for all that.
Absolutely. And one of the things that we were aiming to do with the Next Normal Now series is really to help elevate up, from in the impact investing community, we're obviously focused on transactions and building high impact businesses, data, metrics, policies, et cetera. But ultimately, we wanted to put a spotlight on how to drive systems change. And how do we actually think about this, not in the abstract of what could happen, if everything went a certain way, but what are elements of that next normal that exists in the here and now. One of the things that we were looking at is, as we phase this out of across 3 different sessions, one was focused on inclusion, another on climate action, and the third on regeneration. I'd love to just hear your perspective on why these are important topics to bring to the Impact Alpha community, and what are some of the most compelling ideas that really stuck with you?
Well, I mean, for starters, your emphasis on system change and reimagining capitalism. And reimagining capitalism is very much, on point with what we're doing. In fact, we've had a series that you've been involved with called Capitalism Reimagined. So, we're all sort of pointing towards this system change. But it, like you said, I think in the regeneration session, these words can get sort of used so often that they lose some meaning. We have to make sure we understand really what we mean by system change, and that we're actually really pointing to that. And so, we were sort of fascinated by all the people you brought together to kind of flesh out these broad topics. But the notion of lifting impact investing up a level towards system change, I think, is kind of where we're at and where you're at. And so we were delighted to work with you on that.
No, absolutely, because I think over the first decade plus of the kind of impact investing movement, if you will, kind of the formal organization of the industry, we'd seen tremendous progress. We've seen more capital. We've seen it's more diverse globally. It's more diverse demographically, and different types of institutions involved. But at the same time, we've seen inequality get exacerbated in many parts of the world. We've seen the climate crisis only gain momentum. And so we were really pushing ourselves to think about, for the impact investing community, what does success look like in a failing system? And that's what really inspired us to do our roadmap for the future of impact investing and host the Next Normal Now series. One of the things I'd love to get your take on is that we're kind of observing an evolution in thinking from kind of like reduction of harm to how do you think about environmental, social, and governance factors for risk mitigation to positive impact, all the way down to like how do we right wrongs and how do we regenerate kind of systems, communities, natural systems, and beyond. You've firsthand witnessed the evolution of like the tech industry's development. Are there things you want to highlight from that, or things that you think we should learn from that experience?
Well, it's interesting you raised that, because I did come in. I was a tech reporter at newspapers, and covered a lot of the early internet days and web days, and sort of saw that a certain set of ideas, shall we say, that now are kind of commonplace, but that at the time were kind of sort of transformational change kind of ideas, certainly in the tech world, and then later as they rolled through every other industry. And I always have thought that this sustainable finance impact investing idea, at least, was very similar in that it was, just at the wonky level, the internalization of externalities, both positive and negative. And if you think about what the value of natural capital is, as you guys pointed out on the regeneration session, and the ways that value gets accounted for, if all environmental and social values actually got counted in, the transformation of the financial system would just be immense and profound. And so it feels to me in a similar way like the sort of digital revolution, that this is now the sustainability or the impact revolution. possibly even, a bigger scale than the tech revolution. So I've always thought of it that way as a great story, like from a journalist point of view, but also from, from the Jin's point of view as a great opportunity, because just the amount of capital that will shift, the amount of deals and transactions that'll be done, the whole way that finance will work will be different. So that's kind of where we're coming at it from.
Yeah. And one of the things that I think is so interesting now is that we're obviously operating in a system and in an economic system that has, in many ways created a lot of the issues that we're trying to address, whether it is, the economic divide and inequality, or the climate crisis, or the degradation of natural systems. And we're trying to use the tools, of the system and figure out how to adapt them in a way to, essentially put the world back in balance, to make sure that people and the planet and our economic systems all live in harmony in a way that we don't have at the moment. One of the things I think is so great about Impact Alpha is that you work on the transactions, you cover the deals, you cover people movement, but you're also trying to wrestle with these bigger issues as well. As we look ahead to next year, we are, hosting our Gin Investor Forum, in The Hague in October, an event that you were part of the last time we hosted it. And I recall
I've been to several of them, and they're always terrific. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're thrilled to bring it back, because we, last time it gathered, I think, people from over 60 countries from around the world, and was, everything from kind of the mainstream institutions to the more revolutionary elements of our community. But what do you think are some of the emerging trends that you think will be on the agenda, roughly a year from now?
Well, I mean, a year from now will be interesting because, we'll have seen where we land on climate and on social infrastructure in the U.S. and other countries. This build back better, as the phrase goes, or build forward better, as I think a lot of people like to say, will have played out. I mean, I think that leads us to sort of where I was going to go with this tech analogy. There's nothing that's inevitable. It's really very much contested terrain, both on a political level, literally on a political level, with elected officials and public policy, which I think impact investors now have a much keener appreciation of the role of that, of policy and of politics to create the investment environment. I think, and sort of the leadership, and sort of point us where we all want to go together in a way that maybe individual actors can't necessarily get that far on their own. So that's one level of it. And then I think, whether private investors step up to that and sort of take leadership, assuming that we're sort of pointed in the right direction. We've been waiting for that, and you've been waiting for that. You've been at it longer than me, predicting sort of the inflection point of capital. We've seen it obviously grow, steadily and very healthily, but we haven't really seen it become the dominant strain of capital flows. And I don't know whether a year might be too short, but 3 years I don't think is too short for it to have really doubled and then doubled again and then doubled, and then these exponential kind of trends can be quite powerful and move things very rapidly. We think things take a very long time, and then they move very quickly. And we're always waiting for that,
yes,
sort of that moment. But we'll know a lot more in a year whether we already are there, or whether it's really pushed off even further.
Yeah. Well, and I think that that brings up this point that we actually used in the last Gin Investor Forum as a framing for the discussion. My colleague Sapna Shah presented this as the MC of the event, but this concept that comes from biology around punctuated equilibrium.
Yes.
That actually evolution is not like kind of a gradual progression, but there's periods of stasis and then huge leaps forward with how species evolve. And I've always found that that's a great kind of reference point for us, where we are seeing a lot of progress in many ways, but it's time for some of those big leaps.
Time for the Cambrian explosion, Amit. That's what you. That's the perfect example of it. Yeah, and I will say that I've been. I guess the other thing, what the punctuated part of the punctuated equilibrium may have been the pandemic. And, when we got, 18 months or so ago, there were a lot of talk about this disruption. Is this the big one? Is this the one that really shakes the system to its foundations? And at some level it did. And I think we'll come out of it and we'll see that it really was quite a disruption that ushered in many new ways of doing things. But at the level, I think, of the system change you're talking about, kind of like not quite. And there's some lessons to be taken, like, well, what level of disruption, is required actually, because that was a pretty big one. And we had a call out, and others had called out. We had 10xing impact investing. I don't think that actually happened. And so I think we all have to take stock of, well, like, what will it take to really, change the system at a fundamental level? And again, it's really gets to this level of power, which, to your credit, you guys have taken on in these sessions, that, and impact investors, I think, have to look at themselves in a sense too. Do they really want the level of transformative change, or do they want to nibble around the edges and, obviously make things better? And that's all positive, but is it really go to what you were, very powerfully called out in your comments, about the radical change from an extractive sort of system to a regenerative system. I don't know that, I think we have to reach inside ourselves as well as look to, external leadership to really bring that forward.
Yeah, well, no, that absolutely resonates. And as we bring this to a close, I think what also comes to mind for me is that point that you made earlier from your experience with the tech industry of, that agency matters. We cannot take it as a foregone conclusion around how a system will evolve. But our network collectively, your network collectively, have a role to play in shaping the trajectory of how things unfold and going forward. Because a disruption on its own, even when as severe as COVID, doesn't just kind of wave a wand and shift the system, but it actually still paves the way for. A lot of work needs to get done. So with that, David, I just want to not to cut this short, but at least for now we'll have to bring this to a close. But thank you for your support to make Next Normal now a reality, and it's such a pleasure to sit down with you today.
Always a pleasure with you too, Amit. Thank you.
And as a reminder for our viewers, you can watch all of our Next Normal Now convenings on our YouTube page. Just search for the Global Impact Investing Network channel. Please be sure to follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter to continue this important conversation with Ajin, with Impact Alpha, with me, with David. And if you haven't already, please sign up for our newsletter by clicking the newsletter button on the very bottom of our homepage. So until next time, take care and stay safe.